Thanks very much for that introduction, Craig. I'm going to talk to you today just for a few minutes about MSS 1000. And this is relatively unknown to most people, but it's a new universal management system standard that facilitates fully integrated management systems without boundaries. So this is quite a new way of thinking. It's a little different to what people generally experience in using sort of ISO standards. But hopefully you'll find it interesting and hopefully give you a little bit of a vision of what is possible in the future and maybe to challenge a little bit some of your existing concepts and thoughts. Okay, so this is, you're looking at here at the moment on just my master slide list, and we may go backwards and forwards a little bit in the questioning, but I shall start off by sort of taking it through sort of linearly. This presentation really sort of gives a bit of a dream or a vision. So the idea is that rather than in an organization where you have a lot of sort of fragmented systems and fragmented standards and whatever. So the dream is that we have one organization which is delivering the purpose of the organization. And to do that effectively, we should have a single integrated management system that covers or manages the totality of the structures and processes that deliver the purpose of the organization. You know, if we have a lot of separate fragmented management systems, then you'll find conflicts sort of come up where you're trying to define or design a process for say making sure that people are safe, but then you might find that in some way this is upsetting your environmental management, and certainly there are going to be commercial aspects as well. So these things have to be balanced and they need to be kept fully in mind. You know, integrated management is essentially about managing every aspect through reductionism if necessary, but always with respect to the whole. So integrated management is really an approach to management. It's a conceptual approach that leads you to behave in a particular way and also to have an integrated management system rather than umpteen separate management systems. So to facilitate this, it makes sense to have a single universal management system standard. I mean, at the moment there's a proliferation of standards within ISO and other bodies, and a lot of sophisticated organizations have very demanding stakeholders that put other requirements, and all these things have to be brought together and managed in an optimal way if you are going to be competitive and also to stay in business in the long term. And it makes sense also to have, because many people have already, or many organizations have integrated management systems, it makes sense to have a single certification process. I mean, at the moment your certification assessors can come and look at your integrated management system and look at it against these umpteen ISO standards and give you umpteen certificates and be there a lot longer than necessary, take up a lot of your time, and then to add insult to injury, they will charge you for all of this. So you can see that it makes sense really. This dream of the future is something which is win-win for business. It may not be win-win for certification bodies and consultants or whatever, and I happen to be a retired consultant, but really our focus should be on making businesses just operate better and interact better, and the bottom line is really that globally this is absolutely necessary if we're to overcome the big challenges that are facing us. Because these approaches can be used not only in commercial organizations, but they can also be in governmental and whatever. So this is the universal dream that should be very attractive to business, but also to governments. Right. So this is just a definition of integrated management, which I've already hinted at. It's an approach to management that seeks to understand and effectively direct every aspect of an organization so that the needs and expectations of all stakeholders are equitably satisfied by the best use of resources. And such a definition naturally leads to sustainability because stakeholders can be global, including those as yet unborn. So this is the sort of general landscape that we have for management system standards. If we go to the right-hand side, we'll see the various fragmented ISO approaches. Not only ISO, but many other standards bodies, they tend to have performance-based standards rather than sort of structure and process focused. So we've seen some sort of change within ISO, and they've moved using what is technically known as ISO Annex SL to align these standards. So they've got sort of a few common standard sections, and a lot of the content is sort of lined up under these standard headings. But under the headings, that is not integrated across the standards, and also there's a lot that ends up being put into the appendices because the Annex SL is not an ideal structure. And then on the left-hand side, we have what we call the universal routes. Well, the International Atomic Energy Agency, a few years back now, I don't know, 6-7 years, they changed their approach. So they went away from quality standards and safety standards as such, and they then produced standards which are structure and process focused, which would make more sense to anybody operating a business, because it's what they look at to deliver their purpose and actually stay in business. And MSS 1000, this Universal Management System standard, that takes exactly this same approach, and we'll say a little bit more about that later on. But effectively, this will facilitate a management system with no boundaries. So we see quite commonly now HSEQ integrated management systems, but we can take that a lot further and include everything within the organisation that has to be managed. And this is a sort of a natural progression, but a lot of these aspects of running a business are not covered by ISO standards or certification indeed. So this is an old model. It was around, certainly I saw it around 1995 when I happened to be part of a standards development group within BSI, where that was on health and safety. So this was on the left-hand side. We've got these things that people tend to readily recognise if you sort of have anything to do with standards. Even companies that have not met ISO standards before, what they tend to see is a lot of common stuff. And this would, what we would at that time call the sort of core requirements, but then there'll be more specific stuff about health and safety, security, finance, environment, etc. So it was thought that you should perhaps have a core and then all these specialist standards surrounding it. And certainly coming up, there was a lot of discussion before the turn of the millennium actually for ISO to produce a core management system standard, surrounded by others. But in the end, they didn't go that way, and they went with the aligned approach of an XSL, which I've already mentioned. But in sort of 2011, there was a sort of paper published in Quality World, and this showed that you could produce a fully integrated management system. And here I must stress, we're talking about management. So in other words, you can manage the totality through this core, which actually expands to cover everything. Now, it's not to say that you won't have sort of detailed work instructions and that cover a whole manner of different specialist things requiring different disciplines to participate in that, and looking at the risks and the opportunities and whatever. So what it means is effectively when you in your integrated management system, you can do this with just 12 standards, and you can cover absolutely anything that the organisation needs to manage. MSS 1000, just sort of quickly, in 2011 there was a sort of call put out for volunteers to participate, and that group was sort of brought together, and I led that group and prepared the drafts. And in 2014, MSS 1000 was published free on the web, and the total budget spend was zero because everybody gave their services freely. It was all done via the web and email, so there was no hiring of venues or whatever. So these are the benefits, the key benefits and features of the standard, and I'll quickly go sort of clockwise around this, just to give you just a bit of a feel. I mean, in each of these we could go into a lot of depth, which we obviously won't today because of the time. So it's a one-stop standard and guidance. Everything is in it. It tells you all the requirements as you would in any other standard, and it also includes the guidance. It's all there, and it's internally hyperlinked, so you can look down your requirements in a particular section, and then you can quickly just click and go across for guidance, click and come back again into the main requirements part of the standard. It's got thousands of hyperlinks in it, so the whole standard it's been sort of structured quite differently from an ISO standard. And it uses the language of business. So it's not in terms of any particular discipline's jargon. It's freely accessible, so you can download it from the web anywhere. So it's universal and boundless, so it does cover everything, and if anybody thinks that it doesn't, we'd be happy to know, and we'll tweak it. But so far nobody has been able to point out that it's not boundless. And it transcends disciplines, so you can manage any aspect that is normally looked after by a particular discipline, like environment, security, or whatever. It promotes this concept of the big Q that some quality people talk about, and this is effectively, the quality started with making sure that widgets were fit for purpose, and then it's expanded from there, and some people sometimes talk about the big Q now. So in other words, that covers quality permeating anything within an organisation. So even if you go into how employees are paid out, the fact that that's done effectively and efficiently and keeps them happy would be all an aspect of big Q. It promotes the quality profession. If the quality profession wish to step up and take on this bigger role, it's qualitative and quantitative. So it can be used like an ordinary standard, like an ISO standard, and just get non-conformities and observations against it. But it's also quantitative. It's got inbuilt a system for numerically assessing compliance, and it can produce a numeric report. This aids benchmarking with other parts of the organisation and also with other organisations, and indeed with your suppliers. You can operate exactly the same system throughout. And it's got 3 levels of compliance: bronze, silver and gold. The bronze looks basically at functionality. Can you operate the company effectively? And then at the silver level, it looks for commercial responsibility, so the way in which you interact with other organisations and internal stakeholders like employees and whatever, so that you make sure that internal and external contracts all have integrity, and that whole process is operated such that it gives anybody a high level of confidence. And then the gold level is social responsibility, and that sort of takes up to a level where when operating your company, you look at the social impact and also the opportunities. And many organisations now are becoming very aware that not only do they have to be commercially responsible, but social responsibility is also important if you want to keep your customers and other stakeholders happy. It aligns with stakeholder needs and aspirations. So I won't go into all of this, but there's been a lot of criticism of standards and certification, and MSS 1000 has attempted to take that all into account. Readily navigable, say with these hyperlinks, so you can go backwards and forwards. It's got a whole, it's got a whole set of standard definitions. So you'll see that as you read the text, you'll see a particular word that would normally be defined or you suspect to be defined, and you can see that it is by hovering over it. And then you can go straight to the navigation, straight back to the text. I mean, you'll notice that in ISO standards, there's always sets of definitions, not all of them necessarily in the standard, and they're not in alphabetical order, because I'm told when they're translated, they have to be in the same order. So there's things like this that we've been sensitive about. We've listened to what people want and hopefully try to deliver that. It's got a tried and tested sort of structure. It's actually fully integrated management systems, pretty well on similar sort of lines, have been tested, and they've achieved multiple certifications. So it isn't a question of something being thought up and then just rolled out without there's some confidence that what is in it is what is required. And it creates choice, so there's an alternative to ISO and other standards now, stimulates innovation. It was only a few years back, many people said it just was not possible to have a universal management system standard. So that myth now has been broken, and this should stimulate research. Supports IT applications, so it's heavily bookmarked, and it's quite free to use on the web, so that this standard can be embedded in commercial and other applications, such that you don't have to go off and look at the standard. You can actually call aspects of the standard directly from your integrated management system. So it's hopefully practical and pragmatic, because it has been linked to actual systems and very much linked to the concept of running an actual business. It supports simpler certification, not only because you've got a single management system, but the whole way it's structured, you can check things in a very logical way. And as I said earlier, it stimulates academic research, and there's already been quite a bit of interest from people around the world conducting research projects. So I mentioned earlier that, that you can create just 12 management procedures and cover anything in the business. Now here you'll see sort of 12 aspects that need to be covered, and this is sort of technically known within a standard or a management system as a sort of a taxonomy, which is just a sort of a jargon word for the main sort of issues, you know, that need to be covered. Now, MSS 1000 covers these 12 issues in a hierarchical structure. So you'll see just the top of these sort of 12, effectively 12 individual hierarchies. So as you can see along the top, it covers the Plan, Do, Check, Act, and this covers strategic, tactical and operational levels. So it is universal and covers the whole organisation. So in the plan section there, we've got analysis and synthesis, which is, you know, for some people they might call this quality planning, or they might call this risk assessment, or prospect assessment, or marketing analysis, or whatever. So all of that, it comes under item 1. And then we can then see that this splits up into a number of items that are key things or key components of a business. And obviously all organisations contain personnel, they can contain commerce, even if they're not a commercial organisation, they still have contracts. And this is very important, the way in which that is done and managed. They have data, becoming increasingly important now as we're doing much more virtually, and this sort of global communication with all, of course, the associated problems of cyber data. So we're not just talking about cyber data here, we're talking about cyber and non-cyber data, and matter and energy. So this covers all infrastructure, whatever, which obviously varies according to the business, and then suppliers. Then we come across, and of course these items I've just mentioned can also be a component of various sort of structures and processes, and there's 3 main types. So we've got in the middle there, number 7, the delivery processes, which deliver the purpose of the organisation, and they, you know, the product, services, which enable the organisation to meet its purpose and hopefully stay in business. And then at the top we've got contingency processes, and that's when the delivery processes cannot cope for some particular sort of reason. Many different types of contingency processes, crisis management, you know, we can have accidents and incidents and events. So these are covered comprehensively in the standard. So you don't have to go across for, you know, a separate standard for, say, disaster recovery or whatever. It's all there, and it's all integrates with everything else. So you'll find if you look in contingency planning, you will see cross-references within the standard to related aspects, because obviously everything in the standard doesn't exist in isolation. And of course you can follow these references, and very quickly within a second or two you can be right back where your principal focus was within the standard. And then there's various types of change: short-term, long-term, temporary, permanent change. They're all covered within that. And then we've got, under the check aspect of Plan, Do, Check, Act, we've got reactive investigation. So all types of events, not necessarily all negative. I mean, if there's some sort of windfall or something good happens within the organisation out of the blue, that should also be looked at. But everything is within the within this aspect of the standard encourages you to take a broad approach, so that with an event you look at that event, you know, with respect to product, service, quality, health, safety, environment. So we always look at everything from this total perspective, so that when you get events, and obviously you then enact some sort of change under 9, you do it in a very balanced and fully informed way. And then 11, planned monitoring, and this is a whole range of monitoring, not just sort of audits, internal, external, etc., but also using inspections and benchmarking. And again, it's encouraged that you look at these as a sort of a package, and these are prospect and risk informed. And then all of this leads into the final group here, item 12, which is review and action. And here you look at all of these other aspects, 1 to 9, and then you make sure that the stakeholders are being optimally satisfied, but also trying to anticipate what your future stakeholder requirements are going to be. So it's not just a question of looking back, but it's also looking forward, looking at future trends. In the UK, it will be looking at the implications of Brexit, which is on their minds at the moment. And then this all feeds back into the sort of process again. It's a continuous cycle, and you see along that bottom band, it's about achieving continual improvement, but also alignment with stakeholders' evolving needs and aspirations. And very often this secondary part is not addressed, but it is within MSS 1000.
I've got some questions. So it looks fantastic.
Okay.
Looks fantastic. That's because I saw your presentation at the Asia Pacific Quality Conference, and so was so impressed that I wanted to get you onto this presentation. So the people that developed it sort of came from the Chartered Quality Institute in the UK, is that right? And some others?
No, not necessarily. I mean, right. Yes, some did, but they were. It's this article called. It was about orderliness in organisations. Perhaps the title will come back to me in a minute. And at the end of it, there was just an invitation to join this sort of group, and they came different people and around the world, and some participated in different ways. Some people had really good, strong reviewers, of standards. So others had broader sort of views. There was one guy in the States just much more sort of focused on business, and one of his suggestions was that we put an executive summary at the front of it. And so there were things like this, and this is why the standard is so different to others, right or wrong. We happen to think for good, but others will judge us.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting for me. I've come from a certification body background, and sort of understand I can see the pushback from ISO on this, because you're combining sort of 9, 14, and even the health and safety ones, the 45,000 that might be coming out soon.
Sure.
But you've obviously taken it further. I can see the pushback on ISO, because if you combine all those standards into one standard, it will actually reduce their income, and so they will push back, because they've obviously got a financial benefit in having these standards separated. So I can sort of see this not being the flavour of the month, or the thing that would take ISO forward, because they could see this one could actually combine all the standards together and be against their sort of philosophy of making money out of the existing standards. Do you have an opinion on that, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it was like the canal company's attitude when the railways were being created, and there's always, it is what is known as a disruptive technology or innovation. I mean, it's really good news for businesses, but even with various disciplines, they're not going to push for it because it's unsettling for them. And we found in our research that the push for integrated management is generally come from top management. Top management has said, we just want to operate the business in this way, and we want to use joined up thinking. We don't want, and once, I mean, there's many companies that have multiple certifications, and I know it takes up an awful lot of their time and money, and of course, the proof is in the tasting, really. And I think many companies have got integrated management systems now, not necessarily full ones, but they're feeding back that they like them, and the trend is there. I mean, even in the research 2011, within the UK respondents, 4 out of 5 said that they already had an IMS or they were going to implement one.
Right. Yeah. Because I can
mainstream thinking.
Yeah, I can see certification bodies would push back on this as well, because if there's this integrating your systems will reduce their income, because you'll do the audit a lot quicker with an integrated system, and they wouldn't. Obviously the requirements of the accreditation bodies wanting you to do so many days of auditing to prove 9,000, 14,000. With this MSS 1,000, the requirement would be fewer days, and so their income would be less. So obviously there'll be pushback from certification bodies. Have you presented this to certification bodies? Are they aware of it, or you've kept away?
Not deliberately, but we've tended to sort of, I mean, we're quite busy because we're all, doing other things, and of course we're volunteers within this group and everything. But,
I understand.
We tend to respond. I mean, at our last meeting, we realised that we now have to focus on top management. I mean, that is where change is sort of driven. It's so, I can understand certification bodies and others taking this approach, but if you were to apply ISO 9001 to a certification body, then it should be customer driven. And if you're operating restrictive practices when you know that there is a practice that makes much more sense and would provide much more value to your customers, it's not really defendable in my view. But these things take time. I mean, with general change and improvement, it doesn't happen overnight. But it was only the turn of the millennium, and many of the forums, quality forums, were sort of saying, "Oh no, IMSs, they don't work," but they're just here now, and nobody sort of questions them particularly. I mean, there are some that do, and obviously with some organisations they may have very good reasons for not having one, but the feedback now is and it's just becoming, it's a paradigm shift anyway regarding IMSs. It's just now the standards and the certification which is lagging, and they have been very much lagging the standards bodies, because at the turn of the millennium they were, well, a little bit maybe after that, they were caught out because the organisations were saying, we want auditors to come along and look at our IMS, and they went through an enormous sort of process of retraining. And I know one of the certification bodies that I've experienced the other side of the fence on, they were telling me that they made about 5% of their assessors redundant because they wouldn't agree to be retrained. They were ISO 9001 and they wouldn't do the others, so they just made them redundant. So
that's interesting.
When the demand is strong enough. But at the moment, and that's maybe, I'm not saying our fault, because we've had limited resources, and obviously producing a standard like this is taken a lot of effort and other things. But we really we could do with a big marketing organisation for MSS 1000.
Yes.
But we know now that we've got to now focus on the organisations that really look after top management and speak to them directly.
Yeah, yeah, because I really like it. I think it's a great idea, and yeah, I'm certainly, with this talk now, I'm certainly going to push hard and push it along with some of our customers and make them aware that there are other standards that are out there that will help them improve their businesses. Um, I think the pushback from certification bodies and accreditation bodies and ISO on this sort of stuff will stall it for a while, but I think because there'll be more and more industry demand, they'll have to do something about it. But I think it'll be a battle. It's the 9014 and all the others. Those standards are so ingrained now, and the way that they're audited, and it's so ingrained that these are sort of commercial businesses now, and I think they take their commercial responsibilities first when really they should be looking at what the customer's demanding. And certainly for my company Mango, we're an integrated software product. All our customers, we've got 600 customers, all of them want integration, and these certification bodies, if they push back against, like you said, 4 out of 5, I'd say 100% of our customers want integration. If customers keep pushing back against these certification bodies and actually demand that we have integrated systems, then hopefully change will come. But I think it's going to be an uphill battle, because they'll put their commercial hat on before they worry about the customer. I think that you're obviously going to need a big marketing push to be able to, and you are all volunteers, but I'm going to do wwhatever's helpful to get you along the way. It was just this presentation.
That's great. I mean, you're a pathfinder, aren't you?
well,
I can say you're a pathfinder, Craig, and
that's why
we get people like you aware. This multiplies, and
So
there is one thing though that I would mention, because this is a sort of a benefit of the standard. Other than using it for sort of certification or whatever, that,
of course,
we're aware this is going to take a while, but if you want to create an IMS, you can use the standard to create the IMS, but it will then in turn be compliant with these multiple standards. So you can effectively have, you can, and not only that, but you can, within the standard, you can self-certify. It's got that facility in there. So it's a small company at a sort of a bronze level. They can, if they're sort of confident that they've met all the requirements, they can say, we are self-certified to that. I mean, we're probably sort of, I guess, violating some of the certification principles. I don't know, but we just felt that a small company, it's very good to get a good structure in place that will then be compliant against all these multiple standards, and they will do it in the most effective and efficient way. And then people can come in and certify them as appropriate and to their sort of needs, without them having, if they've sort of gone down and got 9001 and they suddenly want 14001, they don't have to sort of go and get a consultant and sort of rejig the management system, because the structure's already there.
No, well, I like it because you guys are from the industry, so you've built it from the industry's view. You've written it around what the industry wants, as compared to ISO, which seems to come from a standards basis, and it's still very, the ISO standards are still very much written around manufacturing. They say it's not, but it's still very heavily manufacturing focused, and the terminology, because when we're dealing with some customers, the terminology is still very very high level. It's almost impenetrable unless you've got a consultant helping you.
It is
standards. And I like your one, your MSS one. It's much better written, or it's more industry or business focused rather than standards focused. So that's what sort of caught my eye.
We tried
to look through it.
When we've created, I don't know, there must be about 150 standard definitions, management definitions, and as far as possible we tried to make them sort of intuitive, sort of everyday sort of language. I mean, but they are very precisely defined, but they apply to whatever type of management, whether it's finance or, I'm not saying that all the technical, there's technical definitions within different disciplines, and we haven't sort of necessarily covered those, but just it gives them a set of definitions and a way of communicating that is universal, so they can write their procedures, management procedures, and also this can form a basis for training. So when you train people, you use the universal language, and you don't use, you talk about environmental impacts and aspects, and then health and safety, hazards and risks and whatever, but it uses a standard way of looking at whatever. So whatever you manage is in terms of prospect and risk. It's upset a lot of people. A lot of people don't like it. I mean, within the disciplines, because they see it as chipping away at some of their kudos, because somebody else did come to them and say, what does this mean? And I know with the ISO standards, and you see on LinkedIn, endless discussions about what does the standard mean, and then the various, we have, UCAS in the UK, they then have to come down and define what this will mean, so it isn't just a standard, it has to be interpreted and whatever, so that the certification bodies can consistently sort of do their job. But,
thanks for that, Ian.
This is the way of the world, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So we're pretty much at the end there. If people want to find out more, how do they contact you, or what's the best way to get the standard, and how do they contact maybe you for more advice?
The best way is to is to go to our website.
I'll put a slide in here with your contact details, so that's obviously
I can
give me the link to the website. So I'll send you a link to the on a slide on the presentation now, and people can contact. Are you contactable through the website, or who can they talk to if they want to find out more?
Yeah, they can come. They can come through the secretary. They've got a choice. They can join us on LinkedIn, or they can join the CQI Integrated Management Special Interest Group, and we have a steering group and subgroups, and we welcome anybody who wants to get involved. Very welcome indeed. Whatever, whether it's training or.
So there's a group on LinkedIn. So there's a group on LinkedIn they can join and ask you questions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they can. And
I'll put that on the slide so people.
Email. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if people email us with something, we always respond.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Ian. That's really, really interesting. I'll post this webinar up onto our blog, and then I'll communicate that through the web. So people can contact you through your website, contact you through LinkedIn, and thank you for your time today. Much appreciated. I'll end it now, and people can contact you if people have got any questions. They can also contact me, Craig@mangolive.com, and email me questions as well. So thank you for your time today, Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Very much appreciate this opportunity to talk about MSS 1000.
Okay, thanks, Ian.